Maybe you've seen those Christmas tree ornaments with the silhouettes of adorable woodland creatures on them, and you're thinking, I kind of like the design, but I want something that's less cute and cuddly and more epic. Well, how about some iconic tabletop game characters like Kairos Fateweaver from the various Warhammer games, or Xenithrax the Soul Weaver from Heroscape? And yes, Heroscape players, I know what the name on our card is, and I don't care. Well, the first step in this process is, well, to take photos of your gaming miniatures. But there are a few things to think of while you're doing this. First of all, you want to choose characters that have a very distinctive silhouette. So maybe your generic Space Marine or Power Armor guy is not a really good option for these ornaments, whereas something like a dragon or a giant bird demon thing is a good option. Next, think about the angle you're taking the photograph. You want to be able to clearly identify what the various features of the character is, considering the fact that anything overlapping is just going to be solid black on the final ornament. But also you need to choose the angle such that the silhouette is going to be distinctive enough to identify the character. Of course, if you are looking at, say, Warhammer miniatures, a very maybe, what do I say, entrepreneur type person may find a place where every single Warhammer miniature currently for sale is online in a nice high resolution photo with a white background. Just saying. But then if you go ahead and take your own photos, for example, I'm doing here with Xenithrax from Heroscape, you want to choose a background that is very distinct from the miniature itself. Her unpainted miniature is a very bright gray color, so therefore I'm using a black background. The next step is to take the photos of the miniatures you just captured and take them to your computer and use whatever photo editing software you want to. I'm going to be using Photoshop, but there's nothing advanced going on here, so feel free to use whatever software you're comfortable with. What we need to do now is take the photos and turn them into the distinctive silhouette of the character themselves. The basic process is going to be to paint the entire miniature white and the background to be solid black. Now, it's not quite as simple because you are taking a fairly large gaming miniature and squishing it down to maybe a 3-inch tall silhouette. Therefore, you may not want to keep all the detail of the miniature because a lot of it will not come out. And you may also need to make certain features of the miniature bigger and more distinctive. For example, here with the Kairos Fateweaver ornament, his head turned out being kind of faint on the final miniature because of the fact that I made that part of the template here so small. It caused some issues with the 3D printing stuff we'll talk about in just a little bit. And one of the other things you should deal with now, instead of waiting for the 3D modeling step we'll do in just a moment, is islands. So for example, this part of Kairos Fateweaver is not connected to the outside of the silhouette, and that resulted in some issues for me. What I recommend is make sure any of these quote islands are at least somehow connected to the outside of the silhouette of the miniature. It'll make your life so much easier. At the end here, once you've got your entire character in white and black, what you want to do is reduce the size of this such that it is a square. The exact dimensions don't matter, but you want to have a square image. Save it as a JPEG, and we'll move on to the next step. When it comes to taking your JPEG image and turning it into a 3D printed spray paint template, there's probably 24 ways to do this. I'm going to show you one of the hardest because I want to use Blender. I'm inside the software here, and I've gone into sculpt mode, and what we're going to do is create a custom brush using clay strips. So clay strips is one of the tools over here. And then we want to select our tool options. The next step is going to be right here, this little add brush button, and we're going to call this Fateweaver because we're going to be using Kairos Fateweaver. And what I've just did is basically create a new custom brush. All I'm going to do is go down to the texture settings here, and we're going to import our image as a texture. This is a couple steps to this, so let's click New. And then I'm going to call this also Fateweaver because why not? Yeah, I spelled it right. We're then going to jump to our texture settings over here, which is a little checker box looking thing. And then we want to make sure our type is an image or movie. And I'm going to choose Open and locate my image. And what you should see now is your image being displayed here. It's repetition, don't worry a whole lot about that. It's just kind of what Blender shows you. We can go back to our tool options now. For a lot of these things, let me just crank up strength to 100%. Now that the texture's in place, what I want to change is this section called Fall Off. So click on Fall Off. And under Smoother, let me just choose Constant. And before we get started, we need to use something called the Remesh feature. So you see it right here called Remesh. What I want to do is change voxel size to something really, really tiny. This may make your computer cry. So if it does, you may need to go with a little bit larger number here. But I'm going to go 0.003 and then click Remesh. And I'm going to wait patiently. Hey, it actually went pretty fast there. What it just did, if I press Z to go into wireframe mode, I turn my object into a whole bunch of tiny little squares. Oh, save your project too while you're at it. All right, so let me jump back to solid mode. Now we gotta change the cursor size. Using the bracket keys, you can change the size of that blue circle. Make it, I don't know, maybe about 3/4 the size of your square or so. Start over on the left-hand side, press your left mouse button down, and slowly move the mouse cursor to the right. And what you should get is a nice raised up image of your miniature silhouette. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Now we're gonna make your computer cry some more. So I'm gonna save my project, because this may actually take a while. We're gonna return to object mode. Now remember when I did that remesh step a little bit ago? You essentially got a giant object that has way too much detail for a 3D printing software to work with. So we're gonna have to reduce the amount of vertices, which are all those little dots that I pointed out a while ago. So yeah, so what we're gonna do is go to our modifiers tab over here, the little wrench looking thing, add modifier. Under generate, I wanna choose decimate, or if you have an older version of Blender, you might just choose decimate directly. For the ratio, I want to drop this down to 0.1. What I'm essentially doing is having Blender do some fancy math to approximately only keep about 10% of the vertices in this object. Hit enter, and Blender will probably become unresponsive for some time. Don't worry, it's probably doing what it should. And when I say wait, I do mean wait for a while. This could take several minutes depending on your computer's performance. It really can. And once you see this little blue bar return, that means, hey, Blender kind of did what it's supposed to. Ideally, and probably your silhouette's most likely going to look all right. If it doesn't, then go with a larger number here, like 0.25 or something. But if it looks good, click this arrow right here next to the monitor and camera and choose Apply. And wait a little while longer. And when you hit apply, the same thing happens when I just hit enter a little bit ago. So it may take several minutes again. Be patient. And once the modifier disappears, Blender has done its thing. And if you go to wireframe mode, it still looks really messy because a 90% reduction of some massively huge number is still a massively huge number. So let's do this a few more times until you more or less only see a few vertices on any of these given sides. Add modifier, generate, decimate, repeat process. Looking better. We can definitely make things a little bit better, but we're moving in the right direction again. One more time. So there you can see now there's not many vertices on the sides, but the top still looks pretty good. That's what I want it to look like. So let me just hit apply, and I think we've gone down to the number of vertices that we want to have, and we can move on to some of the next steps. So we're just going to go to edit mode now. That's tab, jump into edit mode, And I want to select the bottom, I don't know, whatever, these bottom 4 vertices, and we're going to move them up until you've got sort of a flat looking little thing. And then we're going to go back to edit mode. I want to select all the vertices that kind of make up the top here of our silhouette. And I want to do one little trick to make sure nothing weird happened with the whole sculpting tools. So press S for scale, Z for vertical, number 0. You probably won't notice much, but I just made your life a lot easier. Then press G and Z, and we'll go ahead and just make this really tall. And yeah, that works for now. So now we're going to create the object that's going to be the actual template. For that, Shift A, choose Mesh, then add a cube. Let's see. Oh, and it's pretty much right there. Okay, so what we're going to do is scale this thing down by doing S and Z, so it's kind of thin. G then Z to move it up. And therefore, you can kind of see how it's right more or less in the middle of our object, just like that. And then I want to apply a Boolean operation. But before I do that, I want to go back to our sculpted piece. I'm going to go back into edit mode one more time. Press A to select everything, then Shift N. And that's recalculate normals. And that did some more Blender magic math. Press Tab to go out of edit mode to object mode. Select our new cube. And then for the modifier, I want to choose Generate Boolean. Basic settings are fine, except object. I want to make sure we choose our, basically, we only have one other object in the screen, or in the scene, which is cube. And if I go to wireframe mode, it should look like that your silhouette has now been cut into your new cube, which is what it looks like to me. I'm going to go ahead, press the same arrow here and choose apply. And then I can select our original sculpted thing, press H to hide it. And if everything went well, you should have a silhouette. Of course, we do have, oh boy, we have one problem. Actually got a couple problems to solve here. This is where it might not be a bad idea to figure out how to solve this in the JPEG step, because now you're gonna have to do some vertex manipulation. You'll see, for example, you have like this little piece kind of floating here. That's a problem. So what I would do, honestly, instead of messing around with vertices, because that gets kind of hard, I would probably just, in the JPEG step, draw some lines here, just so that this piece is attached to the outer side of the silhouette. Same thing, you know, look, here's a little break, and there's a little break down here. But I've already got this far into Blender, so I'm just going to go ahead and clean some things up inside Blender. But yeah, this is some more advanced stuff. I'd recommend going back to your JPEG and fixing it there. Well, that is why you go ahead and fix that problem in your image editor. Now I'm going to send this guy out to an STL file and off to my 3D printer, and hopefully it prints in pretty good shape. Now you may notice that during the Blender step, I didn't talk a whole lot about the size of the actual 3D object. You can make that adjustment in Blender if you wish, or if you're more comfortable, you can go ahead and make that adjustment in your slicer program. Of course, the exact size of whatever the cutout silhouette needs to be depends on the little pieces of wood you've got. The ones I have, you're looking maybe about 3 inches tall, but the various pieces are different sizes. So, you know, like I said, it depends on whatever blank ornaments you got right here. So just scale up your template to the right size. And as for thickness, it doesn't need to be that thick, maybe 2 millimeters. So yeah, just scale it to about that size, 3D print it out, and we'll start the painting process. To finish the ornaments, I want to take the 3D printed template I got here, put it down on the ornament such that when it's hanging on the tree, the characters more or less align correctly. I'm masking it off with some masking tape so that only part of the exposed wood is the actual character silhouette itself, and then just hitting it with a straight down shot of black spray paint for a while until the entire silhouette is covered up. And then once you go ahead and remove that mask, we're going to be left with something that kind of looks like this, and they're ready to go on your Christmas tree. And if you're thinking it's weird that you're going to have some sort of fictional demon bird thing on your Christmas tree, well, yeah, it probably is, I'll be honest with you. But while I was shopping for other ornaments this year, it turns out that mushrooms are very popular as Christmas tree decorations and Christmas decorations in general, and that is truly bizarre to me. So I want to wish you guys all a Merry Christmas. Thank you for watching. I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and I will see you next time.